I don't think we're there yet, but I think we can start to make those investments today. And it makes sense for us to do the work to make those investments. And why is that? Because I think one of the big misconceptions about the transition we must make as a matter of policy and as a matter of life and as a matter of just historical fact is that we have to make this transition from the oil-based economy to diversify to more non-oil-based economy. And one of the key resources for us to be able to do that would be talent, human intellect.
Yeah.
And it's human intellect that then comes up with this knowledge-based work and this intellectual property. So the kind of investment that we need to make to be able to kind of make that transition to more, as I like to call them, innovation-driven enterprise and innovation-driven economy has not yet been made, quite frankly. And it's far more basic than we want to give it credit for. So we can't just jump to a research-based economy. However, there are things we can be doing now. Secondarily, and this is a more important point in my own opinion,
Okay.
the solutions to many of our problems, which are extremely complex, and as I like to term them, they are wicked problems. They're not problems that can be solved on the surface.
Okay.
Lies with the proper use of science and technology. So if without us making extra efforts to use science and technology, we stand the chance of being in a position where our problems multiply and they're never solved. And this is really the scenario we need to avoid.
Inyolua, there's absolutely no doubt that effective science and technological policies are crucial in advancing Nigeria economically, socially, and politically, given the varieties of challenges facing our country. I mean, you've just talked about that.
Yeah.
If we were to say that scientific knowledge is somewhat embedded in our national production system, maybe not as much as you would like, but I would like for you to draw a correlation between Nigerians as consumers of science and technology, easily fascinated by gadgets, perhaps the latest equipment or the speed of these equipment and tools that we use to accomplish daily chores against developing our own propensity for knowledge that, if transformed into practical applications, would rather address specific problems afflicting us.
Yes, I mean, naturally, but again, the work that must be done is the work of building the right foundations for that kind of that to happen, quite frankly. And it starts with investing in infrastructure for innovation, right? It starts with encouraging policy. It starts with doing a better job of encouraging research in our universities. These are the basics for us to be able to build this, to make these moves, right? And we haven't yet done that. And I think we have to pay more attention to that before we can make any progress on somewhat of the more sophisticated goals. In the interim, because it's not to say the world is moving forward just because we have the basics doesn't mean that there's no chance that we can participate. But we have to be more intentional about leveraging the expertise of our diaspora in order to be able to build out these interventions, right? And with a particular focus on solving our problems. But without our willingness to actually build the infrastructure that would enable science and technology, and that means, university autonomy. It means more incentives for companies to engage and fund research from those universities. It means prioritizing our intellectual capital, but most importantly, it means embracing our diaspora. Without doing those things, it's not going to go very far.
You've raised a couple of issues, yeah, but I will take you up on a couple of them down the line. But very quickly, in spite of the inherent challenges, some you've highlighted, and lingering inhibitions to massive applications and deployments of technology in Nigeria, we see a growing culture of tech breeding in the country. I have noticed the growth of tech ops across the country. I talked about that in my opening, and how, some of them are involved in community development projects. How important are these these tech ops to the advancement of technological applications in Nigeria, especially as they target children and young adults. And what does this say about our prospects as a nation of having a technological-driven society?
I think it's very important. These tech establishments, tech hubs are extremely important. They are our, would I call it, makeshift solution to what the university should actually be doing, right? So in the meantime, since we don't have the right infrastructure in the universities, we are now defaulting, sadly, very, very sadly, to a system where we are working, would I say, in these small somewhat siloed ecosystems. And if you see the more mature hubs, they've realized this, like CC Hub. Just recently, they established a center in Ladoke Akintola University, a center for education technology. I see hubs long term locating in universities when they have been granted autonomy, when they have been granted the full ability and to be able to direct their own affairs. That's what I see the future of these hubs becoming. Because right now, they're sort of in the city centers and isolated, so they don't really have the resources to build things out. So that's my sense.
Can you? I know you've talked about universities and what they should be doing in terms of research, but of course you've talked about the gains being made by some of these tech hubs. Can you perhaps reference how these hubs are promoting development in other areas, or if they have the likelihood of promoting other areas of technology, say artificial intelligence, robotics, and if possible, I mean, do you think we'd ever get to a time when we can begin to consider things like space tech? I mean, do you think we just might get there sometime soon?
Around these things, there are already efforts going around. Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for the connection. I was just saying that I have my sense is there's a lot of hubs being built for all sorts of reasons. You look at in Lagos here, we have the AI hub, Data Science Nigeria. We have hubs that specialize in certain areas. I know in Abuja, I've seen an eco hub. There are many different kinds of hubs. However, again, I continue to stress sustainability because they ultimately don't have the resources, the long stay, the environment to be sustainable outside of our centers of learning, which should really be our universities. They're playing a good stopgap. They're playing good stopgap, but they can do more if they're embraced by the universities, if they're embraced by the government in a more significant way. That's more long-term driven, more innovation, ecosystem driven. But in the meantime, I mean, excellent businesses are coming out of these hubs.
Very true.
I know very recently I was at Data Science Nigeria Hub. I've seen a robotics hub in Abuja, iFair. I've seen the things that are coming out of there. In many cases, they're the first touch point for a lot of young Nigerians to dealing with technology. And so that makes them they play an important role in the ecosystem, especially for the ones that want. Right? But I think that these things can be deepened if we get the universities and the institutions of research to embrace them, right? And to leverage them as somewhat of their external stakeholder touch points, where people can feel more connected to the work that goes on in the university in terms of developing intellectual and research capacity.
Yolua, there's also the core issue of lack of venture capitalists that can invest in some of these, in some of our research findings and commercialize them for the purposes of industry and production. There's actually a technical explanation for this. I think it's called the value of depth. between the town and the gown, because you've been making reference to the universities, the town, of course, the gown being the research institutes and the town being the market. Our agencies like yours, I know Future Africa is into helping to find funding and market for tech startups. And what do you think would adequately suffice in closing that gap and bridging the divide between the institutes and the market?
Okay, I find that what is important in having that conversation is to first of all establish what venture capital is for, right? And it's precisely for the reason that you mentioned. It's taking commercializing innovations that have come out of the universities or from intellectuals and taking it to the markets. And perhaps at the behest of a large corporate partner or so on and so forth. That was original venture capital. Unfortunately, for some reason, the definition of venture capital the regulator understands is one that has been somewhat corrupted by this funding avalanche. and so they look at it as a money-making endeavor. So venture capitalists are not really exactly afforded certain kinds of benefits. There is a very, very big fee placed on assets under management, which is not best practice anywhere in the world. Especially because those gains have not been realized. There isn't an understanding that it does take a very long time, and that these are extremely risky investments that not everybody should be able to make. And so there's a need for some process around how it happens. So there's a number of things where there's a need for closing the gap.
Yeah.
And also the country itself to dedicate long-term resources to innovation, with an understanding that the vast majority of that money would be lost, but the benefits that will come out of it would be for the benefit of all. So when we look at what some of our funds like the TED Fund are doing, right, it's all well and good that they fund research. They should actually be going to fund long-term venture capital. Or if you look at what NIDA is doing, Nigerian Information Technology Development Agency, they're going to fund operational issues and so on and so forth, but they should also be going to fund long-term research. These are statutory funds that are designated for venture capital that don't get to venture capital sadly. And there has to be, again, this will not work without the universities.
Okay.
And this is extremely important. Universities have to be given their autonomy to be able to effectively partner with the town. If I wanted to give to a university to endow research on something I deeply cared about, maybe it's political participation, or it's technology for energy, or it's improving food yield, today that money goes to the government revenue coffers, which is not acceptable to me. I want the researcher who I'm giving this money to be directly able to access those funds. And I want the university to think about our collaboration as a revenue avenue for them, perhaps not in the short term, but over the very long term. It's very important that these changes are made, these reforms are made to ensure universities are independent and to ensure that things are done properly. Most importantly, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain level of skill that is expected from the kind of person who would engage in research and innovation, not just within the learning environment, but outside of it. And we don't equip our young people like so. There's no reason why internets don't have broad access to the internet. The universities don't have broad access to the internet and laptops. Without these things, you cannot possibly build a research culture.
Very true.
You understand what? So these are the things that we need to start with, right, to get to the point where we can demand more of our institutions. Today,
I totally get your point, Inyolua. I mean, it's imperative that we lay a foundation upon which tech can thrive and grow. And it's quite surprising because I know countries like Kenya, Rwanda, Mozambique, Malawi, and even Madagascar have emerged as leaders in innovation relative to their level of development. But in spite of our relative impressive economy was not ranked among the innovation achievers in Africa. I know national revenue generation is still an issue, but can national budgeting increase priority on science and tech development, especially for building, and you've talked about that, building infrastructure? But let me just give you an example, and maybe you'll speak to this. It will be simple, or not. I mean, not to be an idea. Rather, will it be a bad idea to prioritize tech development as against placing physical file carrying jobs at the top and technology at the bottom? Which would you rather? Would you rather government invests more on?
Absolutely. I think, in having this conversation, Namdi, it's very important to understand what provisions have already been made and what is being done with those monies, because it gives us a clearer sense of what is already statutorily delivered. So people have an understanding of where perhaps processes are being shortchanged and mandates are not being adhered to. So today, right, every company actually that spends on technology and has more than, I think, 100 million naira in turnover pays NITA levy, right? And that money is supposed to go towards this thing. And it's a hefty sum. But what has that money been used for? I don't know, right? I cannot say that there is a long-term fund where Nigerians can enjoy the benefits of having made this investment, which is supposed to be directed towards technology and research, right? Everybody pays TED fund. Where is that money going? So I think we need to start from what has been statutorily allocated to this industry, right? And then how do we make those funding pools work before we come back to the Nigerian people to ask for more?
Great. I hear you clearly. I don't know if you're well acquainted with, and I'm asking this because you've repeatedly insisted on research institutes and researchers in universities. So I guess you're acquainted with the educational policies in Nigeria. Incidentally, the objectives in the National Policy on Education of 1981 is to train manpower in engineering, applied science, technology, and commerce at all professional grades, and also the provision of technical knowledge and vocational skills and necessary for agricultural, industrial, commercial, and economic development of the country. Just so these objectives do not become mere theories, what do you think we could do as a country to ensure practical trainings and application of technical knowledge from basic primary, to tertiary level and professional institutions as well?
So I think the first thing we have to do, we've been greatly helped by technology. And what that means is that now we're no longer struggling to find the content that we need to educate our children in these areas. Tons of investments have been made from all over the world, such that anything I want to learn, I can learn on Google. Where we have failed as a society, empower our young people with these skills, with the tools they need to be able to acquire these skills. And it's not that much of an investment. In fact, you would be shocked to learn that these investments have already been made. They are just being put under lock and key, right? So you go around the country, I think we have over 26 technical colleges, all fully equipped, but not properly managed, right? So we need to engage the right private sector partners to take over these colleges and make something of them, right? You go to universities, there's no reason, like I keep saying, why every Nigerian university, technology, college, polytechnic student does not have a computer and internet. There's no good reason for it. We spend on much less serious things, right? And we can do that. We can make that investment tomorrow. We have enough money in the budget to make that investment tomorrow if we care to, right? And this is a function of what is possible today, right? So why don't we equip our young people? If we actually just did that, it wouldn't even matter much of the other stuff, right? You would be shocked that these children are able to learn on their own.
Enyoluwa Aboyeji, General Partner, Future Africa, I want to thank you so much for coming on Insight. Your views on the subject matter are thought-provoking. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Just before we wrap up this episode, I would like to throw up a conversation on the Nigerian youth. Against the backdrop of the National Youth Day, commemorated November 1 here in the country. Najib Bello, a public affairs analyst, joins me via Zoom from Lagos to discuss the issue. Good to see you again, Najib. How have you been?
Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing me in.
Great. Before we go deep into the core issues, I do think it's high time we properly designated and designated the age classification, official age classification in Nigeria, and why that in itself is a challenge. The revised classification here, according to the National Youth Policy, pegs the youth classification between the ages of 15 and 29. But then, how many of the youth representatives that you see speaking for young adults out there today in Nigeria fall under that age bracket?
Within that age, right?
Yes.
So the thing is, by mere conceptualization of what a youth should be, a youth is a young person that has left, that is no longer so young, but still dependent on maybe their parents, that is not fully independent. So because of the economy of Nigeria, we have a lot of people above 25 who are still not fully on their own. They don't have homes of their own. They are not independent. They are still with their parents. And, so we still classify them as youths. So it's more of an economic challenge than a thing of age. But eventually, as our economy improves, we'll have our youth age limit set between maybe 15 and 25, which is what is supposed to be. So that's the definition is based on how independent you are as a young person. So that's why we fall between about 15 and 29 right now.
So what you're trying to tell me now, Najib, is that, first off, a youth is personal, can be personal. It's a personal derivative that I can choose, okay, I am still a youth because I'm dependent on my parents and I'm below 25. Okay, I am above 29 and so therefore, and I'm dependent on myself, I'm no longer a youth. But, in terms of what I talked about earlier and not so many people falling within that age bracket, especially for persons speaking for youth. Isn't that a challenge on itself? What it then means is that people speaking for this structure, very vibrant, very energetic structure, are not youths themselves. They do not speak or properly understand a population that they are representing.
I'm very happy with what happened at one of the political party conventions recently, and a 25-year-old was appointed as the national youth leader for one of the big parties in Nigeria. I think that will go a long way in changing the way the voice of the youth is represented in the nation and in all these movements, in the political movement, in the major political parties. And I think other organizations need to borrow the same lead, including government offices, including the military, including the educational sector. We need to see younger professors, we need to see maybe younger generals, we need to see younger people in positions where they can contribute, because it has not served the Nigerian youth well being represented by people who are 45, 50. And even in recent time, we've seen youth organizations, so-called youth organizations, where you see the president is like almost 50 years old. But I'm hoping that as time goes on, we'll see that phased out and real young people, 21, 24, will be representing youths and changing the country.
That's why this age classification question is a very important one.
Important.
And we need to answer that question nationally and across board. But again, of course, you brought up Najib, you brought up the issue of politics, and so maybe we should talk in terms of political inclusion.
About that, yes.
I know that except for the House of Representatives, where a 25-year-old is allowed to vie and contest for membership, what it means is that until a young person is officially 30, he or she may have to wait to contest for other elected positions that are higher. So a 30-year-old is
Yes.
not officially young. Sorry, a 25. You need to be 30 to be officially able to contest. But still, I'm sure you'd like to see more of 30-year-olds in commanding elective positions, not just in politics now, but of course in other areas as well.
Oh, definitely. We need to see more youths, but especially in politics, because it is when you are in government that you can easily change the policies that are working against the youths. So I want to see youths more in politics first. Then when they get into politics and they are able to make decisions in the House of Reps, in the Senate, in the local governments, in the governorship positions, that's when they can be able to say, okay, we need to revise the constitution to allow younger people who are 21 run for office, people who are maybe 19, So when they get into politics and when they get into government, they will now be able to emancipate themselves more to participate in other levels. Maybe one day soon we'll have a youth president. Maybe one day soon we'll have youth generals or professors. But it all starts from the government, when youths are able to enter government and change things to favor themselves.
Najib, I mean, just very quickly off the cuff, I mean, and of course, with due respect to plenty of 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds out there, with sound mind. But how many of those have you come across? 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds with the presence of mind, and all to hold positions like you've just highlighted a couple of seconds ago?
Well, I don't want to boast, but myself, I was a child genius myself,
Okay.
and I know there are a lot of people like that. When we were growing up, there were people who were so gifted mentally that even adults around them were very concerned of the kind of things they were thinking. So those are the kind of people we wish to see moving forward and taking the rest of the youth along. We can't say for everybody that majority of 18-year-olds or majority of 21-year-olds would have that presence of mind and that mental capacity, the wisdom and everything. But there are some young people, there are some that are so gifted, that are so intelligent, that it's enough to give them positions through which they can pull through and carry the rest of the youth along.
Very, very true. The issue of leadership is something else I've talked about time and again. There doesn't seem to be an apparent leadership for Nigeria's youth population. Of course, you go on social media, you see them very vibrant, very active on social media.
Of course.
I think there has to be an apparent leadership structure for Nigeria's youth population. I don't know whether this is an area you agree with me.
Yes, I think it's through organizations. They need to put themselves in organizations where they can come together and make decisions on how to move the whole body of them, of youths forward. So forming non-governmental organizations, forming associations, belonging to even as little as their old students or alumni associations. Through there, they can give themselves a voice and know who will lead them towards where they want to be. So it's a gradual process. But what I know is that by association, by coming together, they can find those among them who have the mindset and who have the ability to take them forward, to lead them to where they.
Maybe I was quick to say that there was no apparent leadership because I know part of the functionality of the National Association of Nigerian Students is to help transit some of these students like from politics within the academic environment onto politics in real life. But we're not seeing much of that happen. We've seen a couple of young adults transit from NANS into politics, actual politics, but not so much of them. Tony Woye of Anambra State is a typical example of what I mean.
Yes, the thing is, the system is kind of rigged against the Nigerian youth. Every time we
I
are
thought I would have
transitioning,
assumed that the system is even now more open with the passage of the not too young to rule, not too young to
they're,
run
they're
bill, which is
getting
now
there.
law, of course.
It's not too young to run this thing. It's not. It's getting there. It's part of what will get them to where they need to be, but it's not enough because when we were transitioning from military to democracy, there were people who wrote constitutions for us. And the whole of the constitution is tilted towards their favor. The old men, the Abdul Salams and everybody, they wrote the constitution in a way that it will favor them, it will protect them, and in case they need to come into power under a different guise, it will be there. It was never written for young people to come out and rule the country. But gradually we are seeing those changes, those constitutional changes, like you mentioned, not too young to run. If we have more of those over the next maybe 15 years, then we can look forward to having maybe 30% of youths in government or something like that. And that is where they begin. But like I said, the system was rigged against them, but gradually they will get there. They will get into positions where they can change things and move themselves forward.
Well, incidentally, the current administration signed the not too young to run bill into law.
Yes, of
But
course.
I'm sure you're aware there are many other interventions by the current administration in its attempt to forge social and economic inclusion for young adults in Nigeria. Isn't that commendable to say? I mean, to say the least. And I'm seeing thousands of young persons, youth, keen into initiatives like the Empire, and of course there are others. Are
Yes.
these? I mean, are these Are these not what some Nigerian youths are clamoring for? Are these not examples of what they are clamoring for to forge social inclusion, at least?
No, certainly there are various programs, especially from the CBN. I've just recently seen one from Nersal Microfinance Bank.
Yeah.
They've opened doors for youths to be able to access some funding, for them to get on platforms where they can effect change both for themselves and others around them. These are commendable, and we need to do more of it because we all know that Nigeria, the youth is the largest population, by far the largest segment of the Nigerian population. So if we are giving maybe 30% to them, it's not even nearly enough at all. So it's good that they are bringing out these programs that are helping the youths.
Okay.
However, much more needs to be done.
Okay, so
Yes.
I'm very impressed with some of what I'm seeing, especially playing out in the tech and digital eco space, and
Of course,
what some
yes.
young adults in Nigeria are currently doing. But what more can be done to further grow that space and see young persons transform their vibrancy and energies into more productive ventures?
Okay, in terms of tech and entertainment, that is where the Nigerian youths have really performed excellently because it does not take a lot of infrastructure for you to code software. It doesn't take a lot of infrastructure for you to sing a good song or make a good movie. So that is where the youths have been able to excel. But if we are able to give them enough infrastructure, if we are able to provide electricity for them, they will be able to create hardware. We'll be able to make cars. We'll be able to make machinery, and all of that. We need to go beyond just creating intangible objects. Intangible is good, entertainment is good, software is fantastic, but for the country to really move forward, we need tangible hardware production. And that is where we need to produce, first and foremost, electricity. We need to fix electricity. Without electricity, we cannot manufacture, and that's where the Nigerian youth is missing out. I know we want them to do agriculture, we want them to continue with the entertainment and tech,
Yes.
but they need to
I'm
get
saying,
into
I'm saying young people keen into smart. I think it's called smart farming now, and I know this fellow who owns coal
smart
ops. I know,
agriculture is
I know he's
it
come
really
up.
is.
Yes, please go ahead. You
Yes,
wanted to say
but
something, Najib?
The machinery that they are using to do this is something that we cannot create right now. And that is what I'm talking about. Nigerian youths need to be able to manufacture machineries, manufacture televisions, manufacture electronics, washing machines. We import millions of those every year, and we are giving jobs to foreign youths. So that's where I'm talking about. That middle place where it is manufacturing. That is where we need to get the Nigerian youths in our millions to start tapping into that. And electricity is key. If you want to manufacture, you don't have electricity, we are wasting our time. So let's provide electricity. Let's generate electricity, 20,000 megawatts, 50,000 megawatts, and we'll be able to do magic. The Nigerian youth would do great.
Najib, just before I let you go, in acknowledgement of the role of young persons in Nigeria, the federal government came up with the National Youth Day celebration. Just so Nigerian youths realize or understand that, yes, government appreciates your contribution, government wants you to participate as well. But, something hits me time and again, sometimes. I know that the youth might become the architect of what they are trying to avoid. Now they are clamoring for inclusion. I get a sense that the way that they are going about it, when they eventually get to where they want to be, they might begin to exclude some strata, some strata like the older persons now. Being a youth is just a face. In life, you grow. First you're a child, you're an infant, you become a toddler, you become a teenager, you become a youth, you become a young adult, you become middle age, you get elderly, you become a senior citizen. Just so we have a rounded society. Shouldn't youth begin to think of, okay, yes, youth, but shouldn't they begin in whatever permutations or calculations or alignments or realignments that they are doing? Work with other structures, equally important structures of society, so we can move forward.
Honestly, I think everybody needs to work together right now, because if the youths continue to think that they are being oppressed by the older ones, or they are being left out by the older ones, by the time they get some power, they may want to also do some of that and overstress or overstretch their reach. So if all of us come together and say, okay, the population structure of Nigeria is such that youths are like 60%. I'm not putting that as a fact, but I'm just putting that as an estimate.
Yes,
if youths are 60% and the younger children are like maybe 20%, then the older ones are another 20%, then in whatever we do, we should consider giving 60% to the youths, 20% to the older generation, and 20% to the young. There has to be a ratio that works for everybody. You can't take it all because you've gotten access to power, or you've gotten access to governance or something else. And everybody right now, before the youth come into full realization of the strength or the capacity that they have, everybody right now has to start tuning that information and letting us all know that things must be done in terms of fairness.
Very true.
You must, whenever you get there, you must give to whoever needs to get something. You can't take it all.
Exactly. On that note, Najib Bello, Public Affairs Analyst, I would like to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on these matters. It's actually nice to see you again. It's been a bit. Thank you so much for coming on Insight.
It's been a while. Thank you.
Elizabeth Amoru is up next.
The 2021 World Drug Report by the United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes, UNODC, revealed that 14.4% of Nigerians are presently engaged in drug abuse, while over 36 million people suffer from drug use disorders. The mostly affected are the youth. The World Drug Report further noted that in the last 24 years, cannabis potency had increased by as much as 4 times in parts of the world, even as the percentage of adolescents who perceived the drug as harmful fell by as much as 40%, despite evidence that cannabis use is associated with a variety of the health and other harms, especially amongst regular long-term users. A worrisome trend, considering that there are 11 million cannabis users in Nigeria who need drug counseling. Emphasizing the importance of strengthening the evidence base and raising public awareness is a focus, and my guest, Chuks Akamadu, will provide insight. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Akamadu.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Illicit drug use is a global phenomenon, and in our nation it is also a concern amongst the youth. Taking a cue from the report by UNODC, skunk, molly, cannabis sativa and others are being abused. How do we make our assessment from these reports?
Well, first I would like to observe that those figures are quite both frightening and staggering, in the sense that that's about 15%, thrice the world average. Being thrice the world average should worry every well-meaning Nigerian. And I think that the time has also come for a broader spectrum of the Nigerian public to begin to see the issue of drug abuse, especially as regards our young people, to be a collective task. Emphasis should begin to shift from law enforcement on the part of state actors like NDA, NDLEA, and NAVDAC to an environment where religious leaders, community leaders, influential people, social influencers, captains of industry, people who are ordinarily seen as role models in the society should begin to realize there is need for them individually to pick up the gauntlet and then complement the commendable effort of state actors in the fight against drug abuse. Because what's really staring us in the face is an endangered future, because the young people are the future of this great nation. And if drug abuse is beginning to decimate their population, then we should all be alarmed. Because that really means that while we are talking about capacity building, drug abuse is busy making nonsense of that capacity building. That's just one angle to it, looking at the negative impact of drug abuse on the capacity of the young person. If you look at it from the health angle, you also find that what we are exposed to at the moment is a likelihood of having a terminally ill youth population, because drug abuse is something that cannot leave you unhurt. It's more than a parasite. I personally consider it to be a leech, in the sense that it comes into the individual, lives with the individual with an ultimate goal of dying with the individual. So that too should worry us because of the health hazards.
You actually mentioned some key factors responsible for this act. Now, peer pressure and lack of family values are the common factors that contribute to the growing trend. But there seem to be other driving factors every year. So why do we, because we've had engagements, campaigns on this particular menace, why are we still having the spike in number?
Well, personally, I think that on the part of the society, we are yet to realize the enormity of the problem we have on our hands.
Okay.
That's why we still have this laissez-faire attitude towards it. By the time we realize that this indeed is a potent threat, and that this is capable of consuming the society someday, if not checked, and then prioritize on it, this trend will continue to be the way it is. But it is. But the moment we realize that, oh, this thing is about consuming all of us, and we treat it as a national emergency, everybody begins to realize that they have their roles individually to play. We are yet to realize that this thing is about eating us up. And then again, I think we should also, as a society, show more of compassion to those who are addicted. We should stop criminalizing drug use and drug abuse. We should look at those who are already in the vice grip of drug abuse, as we should start seeing them as patients, as victims, and not treat them or relate with them as some felons, because that further pushes them away from us. It pushes them away from redemption, because what we should be offering them is support as members of the society who are not hooked on it. That's what I think. That's what I think. One way that we can get out of this whole thing. But by far a more realistic way of addressing this whole menace is for us to find ingenious ways of drafting young people to be at the vanguard of this fight, because the young people are better placed to talk amongst themselves, to talk with themselves. If we keep leaving this thing in the hands of the elderly, I can assure you communication wouldn't be effective, because in the end there won't be effective feedback from the young people, from those who are hooked on it. And until and unless you get a feedback, it will be very difficult for you to know how best to offer help or support.
All right, before we talk about management, family or the society, who is actually responsible for this menace?
Both of them are responsible. At the family unit, the father, the mother, the uncles, the aunties, and every adult member of the family owes it a duty to keep an eagle eye on the young ones, to ensure that they do not stray from the path of honor and go into acts that are capable of destroying them, or acts that verge on criminality. That's for the family unit, because that is, for me, is the most important unit, because that's where the formative years of the young people take place. Then the society at large too have a role to play. We need to realize that in the end, it is the society that will be destroyed. So the society itself, that was why I talked about a broader spectrum of the members of the society. Everybody should realize that there is little we can do. There is always something we can do in our little corner. The churches, the mosques, professional bodies, professional associations, trade unions, and all of that should begin to sensitize their members. I think at present that National Drug Law Enforcement Agency is doing pretty well under Brigadier General Abuja Marwa as executive chairman. I also think that NAFDAC has also woken up to do more than it used to do in the past and all of that. But there must be a complementary role that the society will play to ensure that at the end of the day, the desired results or the desired outcomes would be achieved.
Now let's go to management. I understand you are a critical player in drug management and youth advocacy. So how far have we fared in management?
If you reassure them by way of being compassionate, that's when they can open up. And when they open up, it is the space that they provide for the support supplier that the support supplier would maximize to see how best to manage a particular case that has its own peculiar features.
Apart from taking decisive steps to curb the menace in society, I believe there should be an effective youth advocacy to talk to the consciousness of the youth, that they have a future to protect, that they have a future to grow.
Thank you. That is where the Center for Ethical Rebate among Nigerian Youth come in, Serani. That's where we come in. And this is what we've been doing for the past 20 years. Now, it's a two-way thing. Number one, you have to let the youth know that it is in their enlightened self-interest to refrain from anything that has to do with drug abuse. So it's not something that we should preach to them as though they are doing us a favor by staying off drugs. It is in their interest to stay off drugs. But again, one challenge that currently faces us at the moment is that drug abuse has become somewhat fashionable, that young people now stroll into it because their peers are doing it, not necessarily because they are under pressure or not necessarily because they have a need to do it, because it's now become some sort of social status symbol thing that, oh, if you don't get high, you're a low person. So that's another angle to it. So we really need to quickly and aggressively go into the population of those of them who are yet to be hooked on it, to really tell them that those who are hooked on it are deviants, that they are endangered, that they are not any better than those who are yet to get into it, because it's a psychological thing. Because you know, young people, they it's very, very easy for them to copy what their peers are doing. So if we're able to do that, then we should impress it on them to also take up the message from there with a view to redeeming their own generation in the interest of their own generation. So while they do that on their own part, then the adult population should play a very supportive and aggressive role too, by protecting those who are yet to get into it, and then make sure that those who are hooked on it are treated with compassion, love, with a view to redeeming them and bringing them back to normal situation.
Chuks Akamodo, President, Center for Ethical Rebate among Nigerian Youth. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you so very much for having me.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Stay away from drugs.
See you next week.